The hive cities that dominate Imperium worlds are architectural monstrosities that defy comprehension through scale alone. They rise kilometers into polluted skies, massive urban conglomerations of adamantium and rockcrete that can cover entire continents. From orbit they appear as mountains of metal and stone, artificial peaks that pierce through planetary cloud cover. Within these colossal structures, populations number in the billions, each hive housing more people than entire civilized worlds. The majority of these inhabitants will live their entire lives without ever seeing their planet's sun or setting foot on its surface. They are born, they work, they die, all within the confines of their particular level, often never travelling more than a few kilometres from their birthplace. The structure of a hive city reflects the rigid social stratification that defines imperial society taken to its most brutal extreme. At the pinnacle, the spires house the nobility and planetary administrators, those fortunate few who live in relative luxury with access to clean air, natural light filtered through massive windows and space that would seem impossibly decadent to those below. The upper hive belongs to the wealthy merchant class and mid-level administrators, still privileged beyond measure compared to the masses beneath them. Here life remains ordered, controlled by functioning infrastructure and enforced law. The middle hive accommodates the vast industrial workforce, countless millions who labour in the manufacturums that produce weapons, ammunition, chemicals, and every other commodity the Imperium demands. These workers occupy hab blocks where families crowd into single rooms, where recycled air carries the taste of machine oil and chemical processing, where the concept of privacy exists only as an abstract philosophical notion. They work 12 or 16-hour shifts in factory complexes the size of cities, their bodies gradually breaking down from exposure to industrial toxins, their lungs filling with particulate matter that no filtration system can completely remove. Yet even these labourers live in relative comfort compared to those inhabiting the lower levels. Beneath the industrial zones, the hab levels grow increasingly desperate. Population density increases while resources diminish. The lighting becomes dimmer, powered by electrical grids that function sporadically at best. Water arrives through pipes that leak toxic compounds from corroded seals. Food consists of nutritional paste manufactured from recycled organic matter, its origin better left unexamined. The inhabitants of these lower hab zones represent the working poor, those who lack the skills or connections to secure positions in the manufacturums above. They scrape together existence through menial labour, performing tasks too simple or too dangerous to waste servitors on, collecting waste materials for recycling, maintaining infrastructure that barely functions. Then comes the underhive. The term itself describes a frontier, a region that exists outside the formal social structure, beyond the reach of imperial law and order. The underhive forms from catastrophe accumulating over centuries. Industrial accidents seal off entire sections when support structures collapse. Chemical spills create zones where the atmosphere becomes immediately lethal. Power failures leave thousands of levels without electricity or functional life support. Water contamination renders whole districts uninhabitable by anyone without severe mutation. The wealthy simply abandon these ruined areas, building upward to create new levels while leaving the old to decay beneath their feet. Access tunnels collapse, cutting off populations from the hive proper. These trapped communities initially appeal for rescue, for assistance, for recognition of their existence. Those appeals fall on deaf ears. The hive city authorities calculate that repairing the damage would cost more than the inhabitants are worth. The decision is made to seal the areas permanently, to write off thousands or hundreds of thousands of citizens as acceptable losses. Power is cut, water supplies are terminated, food shipments cease. The abandoned populations must adapt or die, and those who adapt become underhivers, dwelling in the ruins of what was once part of the hive city proper. The physical environment of the underhive challenges survival in ways that those living above cannot comprehend. The air itself becomes a weapon. Toxic fumes rise from the sump, the vast lake of radioactive waste and industrial runoff that pools at the hive bottom. These poisons permeate every level of the underhive, requiring filtration masks for survival. Yet filtration masks fail, their mechanisms clogging with particulate matter, their seals degrading from constant exposure to corrosive chemicals. Replacement filters cost credits that most underhivers will never possess, so they breathe the poison, feeling it burn their lungs with each inhalation, watching their children develop tumours before reaching adolescence, accepting slow death as the price of continued existence. Water represents perhaps the most critical resource in the Underhive, more valuable than weapons, more precious than food. The immense populations of hive cities require massive quantities of water for drinking, sanitation, and industrial processes. Complex recycling systems recover, purify, and redistribute water throughout the hive. In the functioning levels above, this water flows freely, piped directly to hab units and workstations. In the Underhive, those systems have failed. Pipes corroded through centuries ago, their contents leaking into the surrounding structure or simply ceasing to flow when the pumps shut down. Underhivers must find water however they can. Some settlements cluster around ancient pipes that still function, fighting wars to control access to this liquid wealth. Others harvest condensation from the ceilings of the massive dome chambers that characterize much of the Underhive architecture. Moisture drips constantly from above, the result of temperature differentials between levels or leaks from functioning systems in the hive proper. This water is toxic, contaminated with heavy metals and chemical residue, but it is water nonetheless. The desperate collect it in whatever containers they possess, allow sediment to settle, and drink what remains, accepting the certainty of poisoning as preferable to death from dehydration. The most enterprising Underhivers become water merchants, establishing rudimentary purification systems using techniques passed down through generations. These systems function through mechanical filtration, chemical treatment with compounds scavenged from industrial zones, or simply through time, allowing the worst contaminants to settle or evaporate. The water produced still carries enough toxins to sicken anyone from the upper hive, but Underhive constitutions have adapted through generations of exposure. Those born in the depths possess immune systems that can tolerate contamination levels that would kill surfaces within hours. Some individuals discover archaeotech devices that can extract clean water from any source. These relics from earlier ages of humanity function through principles no longer understood by the Mechanicus, using power sources that never deplete. One such device fused with a scavenger named Iros Slag Mist, granting him the ability to extract water from anything or anyone. The thirst generated by the device eventually drove him to madness, compelling him to drain his own companions to slake an unquenchable craving. Now he functions as a bounty hunter, selling his services and his water to gangs while satisfying the device's hunger with victims who won't be missed. Food presents challenges nearly as severe as water scarcity. The manufactorums of the main hive produce nutritional paste from algae vats and corpse starch, rendering down dead bodies to create protein-rich gruel. Even this unappetizing sustenance never reaches the Underhive. Supply chains terminate at the lower hab zones, leaving those below to fend for themselves. Underhivers cultivate edible fungi in the damp corners of their settlements, scraping away glowing green growths and processing them into something barely digestible. These fungi grow on organic matter, human waste and corpses providing the nutrients necessary for cultivation. Algae grows in pools of contaminated water, forming thick mats that can be harvested and processed into a paste, similar to the nutritional gruel produced above. The taste is beyond revolting, but it contains enough calories and nutrients to sustain life. Vermin populations thrive in the Underhive, and these become food sources. Rats the size of small dogs navigate the refuse piles, their flesh tough and disease-ridden but edible if cooked thoroughly. Mutant dogs, descendants of animals abandoned when levels were sealed, hunt in packs through the darkness. Gangs trap these creatures, butcher them, and trade the meat to settlements that lack the firepower to hunt successfully. Some settlements maintain livestock adapted to Underhive conditions. Chickens bred for centuries in darkness have lost their feathers, their pale skins stretched over emaciated frames. They produce eggs irregularly, their protein-starved bodies barely capable of reproduction, but even a single egg represents wealth in the depths. Insects form protein sources that can be cultivated with minimal resources. Roaches and beetles that grow fat on refuse can be ground into paste or roasted whole. The desperate eat them living, crunching through exoskeletons to access the nutrients within. Cannibalism remains unspoken, but understood as a survival mechanism. When gang wars produce corpses, the meat does not go to waste. Settlements on the edge of starvation make calculations about which mouths to feed and which bodies to render down for protein. The practice is never acknowledged openly, but everyone knows what's in the stew pot when no other food sources remain available. Children born in the underhive learn early not to ask what they're eating, accepting that survival requires consuming whatever sustains life. The absence of functional power infrastructure defines underhive existence as thoroughly as the lack of water and food. In the main hive, electricity flows constantly, powering luminators, climate control, communication systems, and the countless devices that make life bearable. The underhive operates in permanent darkness, punctuated by whatever light sources individuals can cobble together. Some settlements possess portable generators scavenged from industrial zones or salvaged from ancient equipment. These generators burn promethium or other refined fuels, producing power for a few critical systems but never enough to illuminate an entire community. Most underhivers rely on chemical light sources, burning whatever fuels they can acquire in crude braziers and lamps. These fires produce heat along with light, useful in the constant chill that characterizes the depths, but they also consume the limited oxygen and fill enclosed spaces with toxic smoke. Choosing between freezing in darkness or slowly suffocating from smoke inhalation represents one of countless impossible decisions underhivers make daily. Some areas contain bioluminescent organisms, fungi or specially adapted insects that glow with sufficient intensity to provide navigational reference. These creatures are harvested and maintained by those who understand their care requirements, creating living light sources that require feeding but produce no smoke. The architecture of the underhive bears little resemblance to the ordered levels above, where the main hive features clearly defined hab blocks and industrial zones connected by transit corridors. The underhive sprawls as a nightmarish maze of collapsed structures, partially flooded chambers, and improvised passages cutting through walls never intended to be breached. The oldest sections date back thousands of years, remnants of the original cities that formed before the hive grew over them. These ancient ruins contain treasures for those brave or foolish enough to explore them, archaeotech devices that still function after millennia, caches of weapons and equipment sealed away during forgotten conflicts, sometimes even intact data archives that might reveal the location of other valuable sites. Most of the underhive consists of more recent ruins, industrial complexes abandoned when they became unprofitable to maintain, hab zones evacuated after catastrophic failures of life support systems, entire factory levels sealed when toxic spills rendered them uninhabitable. These spaces form a three-dimensional labyrinth where gangs establish territories, settlements huddle behind makeshift fortifications, and predators, both human and otherwise, hunt through the darkness. Massive dome chambers, originally designed as manufacturing floors, now host entire communities, their populations numbering in the thousands, living in structures built from scavenged materials and defended by whatever weapons they can acquire. The air shafts and vent systems that originally carried fresh air from the surface no longer function in the underhive. These enormous vertical and horizontal passages now serve as highways through the ruins, routes that gangs travel during their raids and merchants use when transporting goods between settlements. The shafts extend for kilometers, their walls lined with access ladders and maintenance catwalks that have largely corroded away. Crossing one requires either following narrow ledges hundreds of meters above a floor lost in darkness, or rigging rope bridges across gaps where the original walkways have collapsed. Falling from these heights means certain death, the body vanishing into the black below, likely never to be recovered. Water and waste systems similarly no longer serve their original functions. Enormous pipes that once carried clean water now leak toxic runoff or stand empty, their interiors large enough for humans to walk through upright. These pipes form passages that connect otherwise isolated sections of the underhive, though travelling through them requires navigating complete darkness, wading through accumulated sludge, and risking encounters with the things that make their homes in such spaces. Drainage systems meant to carry waste to processing facilities instead allow it to flow downward through gravity, creating rivers of filth that wind through the lower levels before emptying into the sump. At the absolute bottom of every hive lies this sump, a vast lake of radioactive waste and industrial effluent accumulated over centuries or millennia. The sump represents the ultimate destination for everything discarded by the hive above. Chemical compounds too toxic for reprocessing, heavy metals leached from corroded infrastructure, biological waste that somehow escaped incineration, all flowing inexorably downward until it pools in the lowest accessible chambers. The sump glows with its own dim radioactive luminescence, casting everything near it in ghastly light. Exposure to its waters means agonizing death within hours, the flesh literally sloughing from bones as cellular structures break down, yet life persists even here. Creatures have adapted to the sump's radioactive toxicity over countless generations, developing biologies that not only tolerate but require the poisonous environment. Sump spawn, as these monsters are collectively known, range from small amphibious things that scuttle through shallow toxic pools to immense beasts that swim through the deeper regions of the sump lake. The largest of these creatures rival imperial battleships in size, their exact forms unknown because no one who has seen them at close range has survived to provide description. Occasionally, these monsters venture into the Underhive proper, drawn by hunger or territorial instinct, creating catastrophes that entire settlements may not survive. The permanent residents of the Underhive organize themselves according to patterns dictated by their environment. Survival requires community, cooperation among individuals who might otherwise compete for resources. Yet that same desperation breeds violence, creating situations where the only way to secure necessary supplies is to take them from those too weak to defend their possessions. This contradiction defines Underhive social structures, creating a complex web of alliances, territories, and constantly shifting power dynamics that outsiders can barely comprehend. Settlements form the basic unit of Underhive civilization. These range from small communities of a few dozen individuals clustered in a defensible space to larger towns that might house thousands, behind fortifications constructed from scavenged materials. The most successful settlements occupy locations with access to resources, perhaps a functioning water source or a passage to the main hive where trade remains possible. They construct walls from metal plate stripped from ruined structures, establish watch posts overlooking approaches, and maintain armed defenders capable of repelling raiders. Within these walls, something approaching normal life becomes possible. Residents establish homes in ruins, clear spaces for cultivation of fungi and algae, create workshops where scavenged materials can be repurposed into useful items. Leadership in settlements typically falls to whoever commands sufficient respect or fear to maintain order. Some communities elect councils from among their most capable members, democratic structures that make collective decisions about resource allocation and defense priorities. Others accept the rule of strongmen who seized control through violence and maintain authority through continued threat of force. Religious leaders wield power in settlements where faith provides the primary organizing principle. Priests and preachers who interpret the emperor's will and demand obedience to their visions of proper conduct. Trade forms the lifeblood connecting settlements and creating economic networks that span the Underhive. Even in the depths, markets emerge where goods change hands according to supply and demand. Information represents the most valuable commodity, knowledge of tunnel routes that remain passable, locations of intact archaeotech caches, movements of rival gangs through disputed territories. This intelligence can mean the difference between a successful scavenging expedition and walking into an ambush that leaves everyone dead. Physical goods flow through these markets based on desperate need. Water purification equipment trades for weapons, food reserves exchange for ammunition. Medical supplies command premium prices from settlements dealing with disease outbreaks or casualties from gang warfare. Scrap metal and salvage components form common currency, their value determined by potential applications. A length of intact pipe might be worth more than jewellery in an Underhive market, because it can be repurposed for water transport or structural reinforcement. Gangs form the most visible and violent aspect of Underhive social organisation. These groups control territory through force, establishing zones where their word represents the only law that matters. Gang membership follows diverse patterns depending on the organisation's origins and purpose. The great clan houses of the Hive proper maintain Underhive gangs as proxies, young members sent below to prove themselves in combat before assuming positions in the family business above. These house gangs operate with better equipment and training than independent groups, their members drawn from specific bloodlines and indoctrinated into house culture from birth. House Goliath sends vat-born giants to the Underhive, specimens of humanity modified through generations of genetic manipulation and chemical enhancement. These warriors stand head and shoulders above normal humans, their frames bulging with muscle mass that approaches transhuman proportions. Goliath territory occupies some of the deepest and harshest areas of the Hive, where their enhanced physiologies allow them to endure conditions that would kill unmodified humans. They work the forges and foundries, industries requiring tremendous physical strength and tolerance for extreme heat. Their gangs reflect this background, favouring heavy weapons and close combat where their size advantage proves decisive. Hammers, axes, and massive guns characterise Goliath armament, wielded by warriors who consider other houses soft and weak. The Goliaths take stubborn pride in their ability to withstand hardship, viewing suffering as a test that separates the worthy from the worthless. This philosophy extends to their gang warfare, where they advance into enemy fire with relentless determination, accepting casualties that would break lesser forces. Their territories are brutal places where only the strong survive, yet they maintain strict internal hierarchies that ensure order. A Goliath who cannot keep up with the gang's pace, who shows weakness or hesitation, faces expulsion or worse. In the depths, surrounded by enemies and environmental hazards, such exile means death. House Escher represents the opposite extreme of underhive gang culture. Nearly all Escher gangers are women, the result of genetic defects that leave male offspring shriveled and intellectually diminished. Escher society has adapted to this imbalanced population, developing structures that not only accommodate but embrace their uniquely female composition. They control the production of pharmaceuticals and chemicals, manufacturing drugs, stimulants, and toxic compounds that other houses require. This monopoly provides wealth that translates into high-quality equipment for their gangs. Escher fighters move with speed and grace, utilizing agility and precision to overcome opponents. They favor close combat weapons, knives and swords, often coated with toxins that can incapacitate or kill with a single cut. Their gang tactics emphasize hit-and-run attacks, striking from unexpected angles and withdrawing before enemies can retaliate effectively. They consider male-dominated houses like Goliath to be simple and brutish, looking down on their enemies with contempt even while locked in deadly combat. The rivalry between Escher and Goliath has existed for generations, their territories sharing borders that see constant skirmishes. House Orlok controls mining operations and transportation networks, their influence extending from the deep underhive where ore is extracted to the ash wastes where convoys carry goods between hive cities. Orlok gangs are numerous, present throughout the depths and across the surface, serving as protection for trade caravans and as workforce for the mines. Their familial structure means gangs often consist of extended family units, older and more stable than the young warriors other houses send to prove themselves. This organisation makes Orlok gangs better coordinated and more reliable than most, though internal rivalries can become exceptionally bloody when they do erupt. The Orloks occupy an ideal position for trade with all other houses, their control of transportation infrastructure making them necessary partners in any large-scale commerce. They maintain generally positive relations with most houses, the notable exception being House de Lac, with whom they compete bitterly for lucrative contracts. Their gang armament emphasizes mass-produced projectile weapons, autoguns and combat shotguns manufactured cheaply enough to equip entire forces. They also field cyber mastiffs, vat-grown war dogs enhanced with mechanical implants that serve as scouts and assault units. House Van Saar has earned a reputation as masters of technology, producing equipment of superior quality through manufacturing processes that maintain precision lost by most imperial industries. The noble houses of the Spire pay premium prices for Van Saar goods, making them the wealthiest of the great houses. This prosperity translates into gang equipment that outclasses most opposition, sophisticated weapons and armour that provide significant advantages. Van Saar gangers wear distinctive body gloves that help sustain wearers in harsh hive environments, integrated life support systems that filter toxins and regulate temperature. Yet this technological superiority comes with hidden cost. The Van Saar suffer from genetic degradation, radiation exposure accumulated over generations from their manufacturing processes. Their bodies slowly break down, tissues failing prematurely, lifespans shortened despite their wealth. They wear their body gloves not merely for environmental protection, but to conceal the physical deterioration occurring beneath. Their gangs fight with desperation born from this knowledge, aware that every battle might be their last before the sickness claims them. House Cawdor represents the opposite end of the economic spectrum from Van Saar. They are the poorest of the great houses, making their living through scavenging and recycling the refuse discarded by wealthier families. Cawdor territory consists of trash heaps and waste processing facilities where they sift through millennia of accumulated garbage seeking anything valuable enough to trade. This poverty has driven them to fanatical religious devotion, the cult of redemption providing meaning and purpose to lives defined by deprivation. Corridor gangers wear masks in public, hiding their faces from the infidels of other houses, and they arm themselves with scavenged equipment and improvised weapons. Flamethrowers constructed from industrial parts spray promethium across their enemies. Explosives strapped to rats turn vermin into mobile bombs. Their poverty breeds innovation, necessity forcing them to develop weapons and tactics that wealthy houses would never consider. They fight with faith that burns as brightly as the fires they wield, convinced that they serve as the Emperor's instruments in purging the underhive of mutants and heretics. This zealotry brings Cawdor into conflict with anyone who tolerates mutation or deviation from imperial purity. They launch crusades into the deepest parts of the underhive, hunting mutants with righteous fury. Some crusades never return, consumed by the horrors they sought to destroy. Others return changed, their members exposed to things that shake even fanatical faith. Yet the crusades continue, each generation of Cawdor warriors convinced that they alone understand the Emperor's will. House Delac operates differently from other great houses, their business built on information rather than physical commodities. They are spies and assassins, gathering intelligence and selling secrets to the highest bidder. The ruling nobles of the Hive proper use Delac operatives to monitor events in the lower levels, paying for reports on gang movements, resource discoveries, and potential threats to Hive stability. This role makes Delac universally distrusted by other houses, who recognize that anything said near a Delac operative will likely be sold to their enemies. Delac territory is dingy even by Underhive standards, dark and filled with hidden watchers. Their gangs favor stealth and subterfuge, using sophisticated equipment to gather information and sophisticated weapons to eliminate targets quietly. Web guns that entangle victims in molecular filaments, toxin ammunition that kills without visible wounds, gadgets that disrupt enemy communications and sensors. They excel at ambush and assassination, but struggle in direct confrontation, where their physical capabilities cannot match more combat-oriented houses. The rivalry between Delac and Orlok stems from competition over the Yulanti contract, a lucrative arrangement where one house supplies the core requirements of a noble house. Delac held this contract for generations until Orlok operatives destroyed critical Delac infrastructure through hired raiders. The betrayal has never been forgiven, and the houses take every opportunity to damage each other's interests. 5 years ago, Delac assassins killed Lord Hagen Orlok, escalating tensions to levels that threaten open warfare. Beyond the great house gangs, numerous independent groups operate throughout the Underhive. Outlander gangs consist of those who have never affiliated with any house, descendants of escaped slaves or lost tribes dwelling in the most isolated regions. Some originate from defunct houses, families whose ancestors committed crimes so severe that they were expelled from Hive society permanently. These Outlanders take pride in their separation from mainstream culture, viewing their independence as strength rather than weakness. They survive through raiding, scavenging, and occasionally trading with house gangs who need services that cannot be traced back to respectable families. Scavies represent the absolute bottom of Underhive society, humans so mutated that they cannot hide their deformities well enough to pass in normal settlements. Banished from everywhere else, they form gangs that scrape out existence through robbery and scavenging. They raid Gilder caravans, attack isolated settlements, steal whatever they can to survive. Their bands often include stable mutant subspecies like scalies, giant reptilian humanoids that provide muscle for scavvy operations. Other gangs hunt scavies for sport or to eliminate competition for resources, viewing them as vermin to be exterminated. The Redemptionists, religious fanatics even more extreme than House Cawdor, form death cults dedicated to purging the Underhive of mutation and heresy. These zealots see the depths as testing ground where the faithful prove their devotion through violence against the impure. They launch crusades armed with makeshift weapons and absolute conviction, burning their way through mutant settlements and killing anyone who fails to demonstrate proper veneration of the Emperor. Some Redemptionist bands operate independently while others affiliate with Cawdor. Their goals aligned even if their methods differ in extremity. Genestealer cults represent one of the most insidious threats in the Underhive, alien infiltration, operating beneath the notice of authorities who assume all violence stems from gang warfare. The cult spread through infection, implanting genetic material that transforms victims into hybrid creatures loyal to the Gestalt consciousness of the cult. Early generation hybrids appear almost human, able to operate in normal society while secretly spreading corruption. Later generations become increasingly alien, developing extra limbs, chitin carapaces, and enhanced physical capabilities that mark them as obviously inhuman. The cults operate with perfect loyalty and coordination, their members united by psychic bonds that allow instantaneous communication. They see themselves not as invaders but as evolutionary advancement, believing that merger with genestealer genetics creates superior forms of life. They use repurposed industrial equipment and stolen weapons, fighting to spread their corruption throughout the hive. When a cult grows large enough, it summons a genestealer infestation that can overwhelm entire hive cities, the nightmare scenario that keeps hive authorities awake despite their general indifference to underhive affairs. Daily existence for those not affiliated with gangs consists of constant struggle, punctuated by moments of terror. Families huddle in spaces carved from ruins, their homes defended by whatever barriers they can construct. They wake to darkness, punctured only by dim chemical lights, breathe air that burns their lungs, drink water that slowly poisons them. They venture out only when necessary to gather food or water, to trade scavenged materials for supplies, to maintain whatever infrastructure their settlement depends on. Children born in the underhive know nothing else, cannot conceive of life in the hive proper, where food arrives regularly and water flows from pipes. They learn to fight before they learn to read, assuming anyone outside their immediate community represents a threat. Many develop mutations from environmental exposure, extra fingers or deformed limbs or organs that don't function properly. Minor mutations are tolerated by desperate communities who need every able body, but severe deformities mean exile to scavvy bands or death when food becomes too scarce to feed those who cannot contribute. Education in the underhive consists of whatever knowledge elders can pass down, practical skills necessary for survival, how to identify toxic fungi from edible varieties, where to find water that won't kill immediately, which tunnels remain structurally sound enough to traverse, how to fight with improvised weapons, how to hide when gangs sweep through on raids. The concept of formal schooling, of learning history or mathematics or any subject not immediately applicable to survival, exists only as rumours about life in the hive proper. Religion provides structure and meaning to many underhive communities. The imperial cult reaches even into the depths, though its manifestation here differs drastically from the ornate ceremonies performed in cathedrals above. Underhive faith is raw and desperate. Prayers screamed into darkness with no expectation of answer. Offerings made to the emperor in hope that he might notice his forgotten children. Shrines consist of scavenged imperial iconography, arranged in crude altars, maintained by individuals who appoint themselves as spiritual leaders. Some preachers offer comfort and hope, reminding their followers that the emperor watches over all humanity regardless of location or status. Others preach fire and damnation, declaring that underhive poverty represents punishment for ancestral sins that can only be expiated through suffering and violence against the impure. The Redemptionist Creed finds fertile ground in such desperation, offering clear enemies and the promise that faithful service will be rewarded in death, if not in life. Medical care in the underhive operates at levels that would horrify anyone from the upper hive. Disease spreads rapidly through overcrowded settlements where sanitation systems don't exist. Contaminated water causes chronic intestinal problems that slowly starve victims even when food remains available. Toxic air exposure leads to lung diseases that leave sufferers gasping for breath. Injuries from gang warfare or accidents receive treatment using whatever materials can be scavenged. Wounds cleaned with alcohol or promethium and stitched with any thread available. Some settlements maintain individuals with medical knowledge, healers who understand basic anatomy and can perform crude surgery when necessary. These practitioners operate without proper equipment or medications, using knives sterilized in flames and administering pain relief through alcohol or locally produced narcotics. Success rates are low, infections common, but their services remain in demand because the alternative is allowing injured or sick community members to die without any attempt at treatment. The cycle of violence in the underhive perpetuates itself across generations. Children watch their parents killed in gang raids and grow up seeking revenge. Settlements attacked by rivals plan retaliation that escalates conflicts into blood feuds spanning decades. gangs compete for the same resources, knowing that allowing enemies to secure valuable territory means their own people will starve. The strong prey on the weak because mercy means vulnerability that others will exploit. Yet even in this brutal environment, moments of humanity persist. Parents sacrifice to feed their children. Friends risk their lives to rescue companions from danger. Communities share resources during times of particular hardship. These instances don't change the fundamental nature of Underhive existence, don't make it less horrifying or deadly, but they demonstrate that even in the depths, even when every rational calculation argues for pure self-interest, humans sometimes choose compassion over survival. The Underhive operates as a pressure valve for the Hive City proper, a region where the desperate and the dangerous are contained away from the functional society above. The authorities understand that attempting to eliminate the Underhive would require resources far exceeding any potential benefit. Better to seal it off, ignore it, allow the inhabitants to kill each other over scraps while the Hive proper continues functioning. Occasionally, when Underhive violence threatens to spill into the lower Hab zones, or when particularly dangerous groups must be eliminated, the authorities send enforcer patrols or Arbite strike teams into the depths. These incursions represent disasters for Underhive inhabitants caught in their path. The forces from above possess overwhelming firepower and armour, sophisticated weapons that can cut through Underhive gangs like a chainsaw would through flesh. They don't discriminate between guilty and innocent, treating everyone in the target zone as potential threats to be eliminated. Settlements unlucky enough to be near the operation site often suffer collateral damage as enforcers pursue their objectives, with no regard for civilian casualties. The Underhive will outlive any attempt to destroy it, because it serves necessary function within Hive City ecology. It absorbs those who cannot function in structured society above. It provides space where population pressure can be released without threatening critical infrastructure. It allows the great houses to conduct proxy warfare without disrupting their official business relationships. And it represents frontier where the desperate can seek their fortunes, where archaeotech caches might make someone wealthy overnight, where gang leaders can carve out kingdoms from the ruins. This is daily life in the depths, existence reduced to its most fundamental elements. Wake in darkness, search for food and water, avoid or fight those who threaten survival. Sleep when exhaustion permits, always prepared for violence to erupt without warning. Repeat this cycle until injury or disease or simple bad luck ends it. No hope of improvement, no possibility of ascending to the Hive proper, nothing but the grind of survival in an environment actively hostile to human life. The inhabitants of the Underhive rarely conceive of their circumstances as particularly horrifying because they know nothing else. Those born in the depths have never seen the sun, have never experienced clean air or pure water, have never lived without constant threat of violence. This is simply reality, the way existence functions. They adapt because adaptation is necessary, their bodies and minds reshaping themselves to tolerate conditions that would break someone from the upper hive within days. And so the Underhive continues, generation after generation, billions of souls living and dying in darkness, while the hive proper above them grows ever taller, expanding upward toward polluted skies, while the forgotten masses below struggle over the scraps of previous ages. The Imperium built these hive cities to concentrate humanity efficiently, to produce the materials necessary for its eternal wars. That this system requires condemning vast populations to hellish existence barely registers as a consideration. The machine requires fuel, and the Underhive provides it, grinding human lives into the raw materials that keep the Imperium functioning. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no salvation for those trapped in the depths. There is only survival measured in days, scratched out through violence and desperation in the ruins beneath the hive cities. And when the inhabitants of the Underhive finally die, when their bodies are rendered down for corpse starch or simply left to rot in forgotten tunnels, others will take their places. The cycle continues without end, as it has for millennia, as it will for millennia more. This is life on a hive world's lowest levels, and for those who dwell there, it is all they will ever know.